On this episode, What's Going On with Shipping joins the CAVASSHIPS podcast to talk about the current supply chain situation and its impact on the Department of Defense and military Sealift. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. So I got asked this week to appear on the CAVASSHIP podcast. Chris Cavas and Chris Cervello have a podcast where they focus on the U.S. Navy, and it was a great honor to be asked to do it. I mean, they've had some heavy hitters on there. I mean, big name people on there. And so they asked me to come on this week and discuss it. And so I'm going to have a link in the show notes so you can go over to it. It's a half hour. So a lot of people ask me about podcasts. And so here's an example of a podcast I did, but I just want to provide some background too, and some material so that when you listen to the podcast, if you want to go back and take a look at some stuff and see what I'm referencing, you can. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So I'll have a link to the CAVASSHIP podcast right here, episode 27, Supply Chain Woes and Strategic Sealift. You'll see it right here. Chris Squared, they put out a podcast usually every Friday. And like I said, it's been great. I listen to it all the time. So I was really happy that they asked me to be on it. So the supply chain I've talked about a lot. So those of you who follow me, you know we're following the supply chain pretty consistently right now, and we're going to keep doing that. But on the military Sealift side, I talk about a couple of things, and I want to send you over to some sources and some material there that I've referenced before, but just in case, because this is talking about a DoD, Department of Defense related topics, I really want to make you aware of two primary sites to go to. So the first one is, of course, the Maritime Administration website. Department of Transportation, Maritime Administration, DOT, Maritime Administration, handles basically domestic shipping. They handle domestic commercial shipping on basically all levels. Created back in 1916 as the U.S. Shipping Board. They've morphed over time into the Maritime Commission, and then eventually into the Maritime Administration. And then in 1961, they lopped off the Federal Maritime Board, created the Federal Maritime Commission. So MARAD is in existence. And in regards to the podcast I did, I'll make you aware of two aspects of it. So one of the first ones is right here, is this issue over here with their data and their reports. And if you go into their data and reports, it'll take you over to this data and statistics, in particularly this right here, U.S. flag privately owned fleet. And they update this fairly regularly, I would say. But about every month or so, they'll come in and update it. And what it is you can get it as an Excel spreadsheet or here as a PDF. And that's what I got down here for you, the PDF version. You can basically take a look at this PDF, and on it, it has all U.S. flagged vessels over 1,000 gross tons, but not really. They don't include offshore vessels, articulated tugs and barges that may be over that. They also don't include one U.S. flagged cruise ship should be in here. That's not in here. I don't know why. But here they list them all. And like I said, you can get this in a spreadsheet with Excel so that you can play around with the fields. So have their IMO numbers, their vessel names, their ship type, gross tons, which is the volume of the vessel, deadweight tons, which is how much they carry, year of built, their operator. Operator is always a sketchy one there because a lot of operators have sub-operators that operate vessels. So you may see ships listed with multiple companies, even though they operate for a specific company. Are they a member of the Maritime Security Program? Are they a member of the voluntary intermodal shipping agreement, the volunteer tanker agreement? Are they Jones Act eligible? And are they deemed by the DoD to be military useful? And like I said, you can go through this chart right here. And again, there's several pages of it. Unfortunately, the number of vessels is not great, as you'll see right here, 180 vessels, of which, pardon me, I need my glasses for this, 96 are Jones Act eligible and 84 are non-Jones Act eligible. And again, they break them down with charts and graphs and everything you need to be able to see here. And there's more tables available, but it gives you an idea of the US-sized fleet. And again, one of the things I highlight in the podcast that you'll hear is the critical size of this fleet. This fleet is smaller than really ever in history. And this has strategic implications for the United States, particularly in a military style confrontation, where from this fleet, we derive our sustainment and our merchant mariners that we use to crew our surge fleet, which I'll talk about in a second, and our basically ability to supply in case any of those other carriers out there, like the 9 big ocean carriers, decide not to come help us, as had been the case in scenarios like Vietnam, for example. The other aspect under DOT MARAD is this, and this is, sorry, I'm going to pull this back up here. This is the Maritime Security Program. The Maritime Security Program maintains a fleet of 60 vessels in the international trade. And you'll find on here several interesting elements in here that you can tag into. One of them I put in here is this, the ship poster, which they update periodically, not always, but they do it. So if you tag on here, sorry, I'm going to open that up for you. But this is a poster. I've used this poster before. Some of you have seen this before, of the vessels, roll on, roll off container ship, geared container ships, some heavy lift vessels. And down here, it gives you the exact capability of it. These are 60 vessels that are out in the international trade operating. They tend to be foreign built, but US flag, meaning they're not within the coastwise trade. And again, one of the things that had been done in the past is the US, since prior to World War II, had a program where we would provide what were called construction and operational differentials, which allowed companies to offset higher costs to build in the United States, higher costs to operate with US flag vessel, US flag crews. And in the late 1990s, we got rid of that, or they phased out by the 1990s. They started phasing out in the 1980s. And we realized that we were going to have no vessels in the international trade. So they started this program, the Maritime Security Program, initially 47 vessels, expanded to 60 vessels. And really, this is the US involvement in the ocean fleet. I should mention that these vessels are all in commercial trade right now. And should a military situation happen, again, we would hope to tap into these, but right now with trade being the way it is, these ships are tied up in commercial trade. They're booked. Now with US flag vessels, we can always, assume priority on these, especially since they're receiving these subsidies from the US government, about $5 million per ship per year. And this is one of the things, because again, if a foreign carrier sits there and says, we're not going to help you, well, we don't have much say with that. But with a US flag, we do. And that's one of the reasons why you want a US flag ocean fleet out there. You don't want all cargo carried on US ships, but it's good to have this. And plus, those mariners will be used to man the surge fleet. And these vessels have to go into US shipyards. It keeps jobs in the US shipyards. It'd be better if they were built in the US, but that's a whole different issue. And then you have the MSP fleet here. This is a more up-to-date list. It's not as snazzy as that, but it gives you the contracts they're under, type of ship, and who they're with. The other element you have here is the Ready Reserve Force. These are aging ships. These are ships that are basically at the end of their service life. They're given over to the US government, and they're maintained in a high state of readiness to be able to be used in case of a national emergency. There are 54 of these now. There used to be 61, but they phased out 7 of them, excuse me. And these ships are kept in a 5-day reserve status, but they draw their crews from the active merchant marine. The problem is these vessels are old in the tooth. I mean, the average age are in their 40s. These vessels need to be replaced. The problem is the U.S. government, we talk about in the podcast, the U.S. government has been slow to replace these. If you're interested in them and who they are, you can pull up the ship poster. Again, this is one of those posters they do, which is really great. Shows you all the vessels that are in the Ready Reserve Force, along with several other vessels, training ships used by the state schools. Matter of fact, they just laid the keel for the first of the new training ships at the Philly shipyard. That ship is going to State University of New York Maritime College, the finest maritime college of them all. And then a couple of vessels that are used for space surveillance and range instrumentation. And then beyond these vessels too, we also have this is the characteristic of the vessels. So if you want to know a little bit more about each of those vessels, you don't get quite enough there from the chart. You can open this up and it has detailed information on each of the types of vessels here. There's some vessels in here that are no longer in here, but it gives you some good detail about it. So that's the Maritime Administration site. The other site is the Military Sealift Command site. Military Sealift Command, which is an arm of the U.S. Navy, and the U.S. Transportation Command, which is under fumbling my words today, I apologize. It's one of the unified commands in the Department of Defense. And Military Sealift Command operates its own fleet of vessels and charters vessels as needed. And you can find that here on their publications site. You can follow along here and see several things. They have a monthly newsletter. They have their annual report. They have the MSC handbook that gives you all the vessels that they have. And then they have also one of these handy dandy little ship guides right here that show you all the vessels that are in there, ships that are in the Combat Logistics Force, fleet support and special missions, and those in Sealift, including those in the reserve fleet, those used in the pre-positioning role, and those that are chartered by the US government for specific use during times of contingencies. So those are reference sites for you. And if you have the opportunity, please go to them, take a look at them, listen to the podcast. I'll have the link first up in the podcast for you. And again, I appreciate you subscribing, hitting the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos when they come out, leaving a comment, giving a thumbs up, and if you can, at the end of this video, down in the lower corner over here, I think it's right here, you'll see the Patreon page so that you can go and contribute to our page. So I appreciate it. I got to get back out to work. Big party at my house today for my son. So anyway, until our next video, this is Sal signing off.